In the endless sweep of the western frontier, where the prairies stretched into a horizon of gold and fire under the setting sun, there lived a cowboy named James Carver, a man of few words, but a heart that carried the scars and kindness of a life lived close to the dust, the sky, and the rhythm of hooves. He had seen storms that could flatten barns, gunfights that ended lives in the blink of an eye, and winters that could freeze a man's bones solid. Yet for all the hardness of the world, he carried within him a gentleness that few ever noticed, because cowboys were supposed to be rugged, unbroken, and silent as the hills. But James had learned in the lonely nights under the stars that a man's worth was not only measured by how fast he could draw his gun or how many acres of land he claimed, but by the quiet deeds of mercy he offered when no one else was watching. And it was on one of those quiet evenings, when the sky burned crimson and the cattle had settled into stillness, that he heard a rustle by the edge of his barn, a sound that was not of wind or wandering dog, but something frailer, softer almost, a whimper. And when he went to look with his lantern raised, his rugged face lit by the trembling flame, he saw a sight that cut through him deeper than any bullet ever had. A native child, thin as a reed, clothes torn, cheeks hollowed by hunger, eyes wide and terrified yet shining with a stubborn spark of life. And James, though he had been raised in a world where settlers and natives often saw each other as enemies, felt no such division in that moment, for all he saw was a starving child clinging desperately to life. So without a word he set down the lantern, removed his weathered coat, wrapped it around the boy's trembling shoulders, and carried him inside, whispering a gentle hush as though speaking to a frightened colt, laying him by the fire, cooking what little stew he had left, spooning broth to the boy's lips even though James himself had not eaten all day, because he knew what hunger felt like, and he would be damned if he let a child face it alone. And through the long night, as the wind howled outside and the stars wheeled silently above, James sat by the boy, listening to his weak breaths grow stronger, until finally the child opened his eyes and whispered a word in his own tongue, a word James did not understand, but could feel in his bones was something sacred, something like thank you. And though language divided them, humanity bound them tighter than any chain. And when morning came, the boy, still frail but standing, pointed toward the east where the mountains cut sharp against the sky. And James knew the child had family somewhere out there, but the journey was too dangerous for one so weak. So James promised in his slow drawl, "You'll get home, boy, I'll see to it." And that promise was not one made lightly, for a cowboy's word was iron. And yet what James did not know, as he saddled his horse and prepared to guide the boy to safety, was that unseen eyes had watched the kindness unfold, warriors who had tracked the child, warriors who feared the worst when their own had not returned. And those eyes carried back news to the tribe that a cowboy, an outsider, a man of the very world that had taken so much from them, had saved their young one. And while James slept that night, thinking only of how to keep the boy alive another day, the prairie itself seemed to whisper of what was coming, because by dawn, when he rose to tend his barn, a sound like thunder rolled in the distance. But it was not a storm nor stampede. It was hooves, many hooves, steady and unyielding. And as he stepped outside, the morning sun cutting over the fields, he froze, for there before his barn, stretching in solemn silence, stood 200 native warriors mounted on their horses, feathers catching the light, spears upright, eyes fixed upon him, not with rage as he first feared, but with the heavy, unreadable gaze of men who had come to weigh his soul. And James, though his heart hammered like a war drum, did not reach for his gun, did not hide, did not run, but stood tall with the boy beside him, knowing that sometimes a man's fate turned not on how fast he could draw, but on the truth of his deeds. And as the warriors lined the prairie in perfect stillness, the child stepped forward, raised his thin arm, and pointed at James, speaking words in his native tongue that James could not understand. Yet he felt the meaning strike deeper than any translation could provide. For in that moment the boy was telling them, "This man saved me. This man gave me life when I had nothing left." And the warriors' silence deepened, the air grew thick, and James, unsure if he would live another hour, met their gaze with steady eyes, thinking to himself that if this was the end, he would face it like a man, with no regret for the kindness he had given, because kindness, even in a world that prized strength, was its own kind of courage. And as the wind tugged at his hat and the sun rose higher, James realized that the course of his life, and perhaps the fragile bridge between two worlds, was about to be decided not by bullets or blood, but by the memory of one starving child saved from the darkness of death. And that, dear listener, is how our story truly begins. For the next chapter will reveal whether mercy can turn enemies into allies, and whether one cowboy's heart could change the fate of many. So if you wish to follow this tale to its powerful conclusion, don't forget to stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and join the journey, because the prairie holds more secrets yet to come.